This meeting is called to order. We will begin with a moment of prayer or reflection. Thank you. All right, we have a point of privilege from Councillor Sharps.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Sorry, having some technical difficulties there. So, through the chair, I am pleased to introduce you all to Dr. Glenn Feltham, our new intern city manager. Dr. Feltham brings with him a passion for empowering people and building great organizations. Glenn was born and raised in Alberta and has a professional background in both law and accounting. Glenn received his MBA from the University of Montana and his law degree from Queen's University. Glenn also holds a PhD from the School of Accountancy at the University of Waterloo, majoring in taxation and minoring in finance. Glenn brings with him extensive experience in leadership, governance, government relations, financial sustainability, and community and economic development. Through his career, he has played a leading role in advancing the post-secondary system in Canada and Alberta. I won't go into all of Glenn's previous roles, but just to name a few, Glenn served as President and CEO of the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology, otherwise known as NAIT, from 2011 to 2019, where he led NAIT in its vision of becoming one of the world's leading polytechnics with a focus on relevance and responsiveness. While at NAIT, Glenn served as the chair of Polytechnics Canada, a national organization which, among other things, advances our country's skills agenda. He also chaired the Council of Post-Secondary Presidents of Alberta, which works across institutions to build the strongest possible post-secondary system for our province. In 2021, after retiring from NAIT, Glenn acted as President and CEO of Grand Prairie Regional College, now Northwestern Polytechnic, an institution focused on meeting the critical post-secondary needs of Northwestern Alberta. Glenn also previously served as the Dean of Asper School of Business, Chair of the Potash Corporation of Saskatchewan, Co-Chair of the Skills for Jobs Task Force, and a member of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, Winnipeg Airports Authority, and Value Partners Investments, Inc. Glenn has agreed to serve as our interim city manager until City Council has completed a full selection process for our permanent city manager. Glenn, on behalf of Council, I welcome you to our city and your new role. We so look forward to working with you to advance the vision and priorities set out in our strategic plan.
Interim City Manager Feltham, you can say a few words in response if you like.
Let me just express what a great pleasure and honor it is to be able to serve the City of Medicine Hat and to work with the Mayor, Council, and staff in elevating this amazing community. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more point of privilege from Councillor Robbins.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. And through the chair, I just wanted to acknowledge that tomorrow is a very special day in Medicine Hat. It is National Indigenous Peoples Day. And so I thought, well, we had an opportunity meeting the day before that I would take the opportunity to read the statement of acknowledgement of the city on this very important day before a very important day. And I just also noted, I'm going to read the statement of acknowledgement, but I also noted that there's a demonstration powwow tomorrow from 1 to 3 o'clock. Anyone who's been driving may have seen the teepees go up in the park, and that's where the powwow is going to be. So I hope lots of people will attend tomorrow. In any event, I'll read the acknowledgement. The City of Medicine Hat acknowledges that we live and work on treaty territory. The city pays respect to all Indigenous peoples and honors their past, present, and future. We recognize and respect their cultural heritages, and relationships to the land. Thank you, Mayor Clark.
Thank you. We will now move to the adoption of the agenda. Are there any additions? Seeing none, the agenda is adopted. Moving on to item 6.1, adoption of the minutes of the Medicine Hat regular city council meeting dated June 6, 2022. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, we will adopt those minutes. Moving on to item 6.2, Medicine Hat special open city council meeting minutes of June 13th, 2022. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, those minutes are adopted. Now we're going to move to presentations. First up, we have item 7.1, the City Center Area Redevelopment Plan, North Railway Urban Design Project, and we have with us the Manager of Planning and Development Services, Robert Sissons, and he will be also introducing some other special guests, I believe. Welcome, Manager Sissons.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, Council, and I'm pleased to present what has been a 6-week project and a collaboration between the City of Medicine Hat and the University of Calgary, School of Architecture, Planning, and Landscape. So I'll just acknowledge in the crowd that Professor de Salvatierra and Professor Hapton there. And we also have with us today 6 teams of graduate architecture students that worked on this project. So they're in the gallery. So the intent of this project is to envision urban design opportunities and new innovative strategies for the North Railway area. When we started this project, we looked at what a successful outcome would be for this. And in my mind, the incorporation of some of these selected ideas from the project, or at least inspiration for further concept development within the area redevelopment plan. And just actually, I'm just gonna, sorry, I should back up. I missed one of my slides. So just to give another brief overview, I know we've had a area structure plan in front of council here recently. What this one is the city center area redevelopment plan, which is a comprehensive statutory plan that is currently under development. So those plans typically provide that long-range planning that will address matters such as land use, transportation, public infrastructure, the environment, social issues, and any other matters that council deems relevant. So the tentative plan area consists of the downtown core, the North Railway area, which is the subject for this study, and the former arena lands, and could extend all the way over to the Viner Center area. So just very briefly, what is urban design? It's basically how the public and landowners address and perceive and use their environments. So for an architecture student, this is a little bit of stepping outside of the box because they're typically more focused on the site scale and designing that building. This is a much broader area that looks at a lot more at the public realm. So the tentative plan area that we selected consists of the North Railway area. And when we looked at what a successful outcome was, as I mentioned, was going to be that incorporation of those ideas. And I'll just kind of stress that this is the creative stage of the area redevelopment project. These are not for construction. This is just to provide ideas. And having viewed all of the presentations this afternoon, there was definitely ideas that we were able to say, oh, this would be great from this project. This project over here had a really idea about something else. So we're really excited that I think from every single project, we were going to be able to pull something that's of use. The full projects will be on display at the Esplanade for public viewing for a limited time, and we will be also posting them onto the city website. So 2 teams were selected to present a brief overview of their urban designs. All the projects were fantastic. However, we could only select 2. So with that, here are the 2 that we'll be presenting. So the first project is called Emerald Brick Road.
Welcome. Before you get started, can I get you each to introduce yourself?
Good evening. My name is Jolyn, and this is okay. And this is Curran, Wes, and Brennan. And together we will be presenting our project, the Emerald Brick Road. We first began the project by identifying existing open spaces and attractions within Medicine Hat. We noticed a collection of disconnected, manicured and non-manicured spaces typically served a single purpose, rendering them underutilized. So this redevelopment proposal calls for a unifying infrastructure to connect these spaces together through the prototype of a new land management strategy. Taking a closer look at the North Railway District and its surrounding context, it is evident that Medicine Hat already consists of several mature nodes of tourism, but with the proposed redevelopment, the existing disconnected spaces connected by a unifying landscape allows for the creation of companionship and community through journey, experience, and discovery.
We started our research off looking at 3 Canadian cities that share a similar population as well as similar climate zone, and started to look at their main festivals throughout the year and kind of what the numbers look like, how many people in the city as well as that come from out of town. But we actually started to look at 3 international precedents as well in Italy, Germany, and Japan, and looked at their food and agricultural festivals. And we started to look at a little bit of their calendar of events throughout the year and noticed that each different city had a different time period throughout the year that they had more successful festivals. And so taking from this, it's evident that Medicine Hat can prosper in the summer as well as the winter or the shoulder seasons as well.
Can you, sorry, just to go back to that one slide, can you explain what we're looking at? I'm having a hard time seeing the wording.
The green circles. So the innermost ring shows the frequency and duration, whether it's a day or a month or kind of a section of the year. And then it shows the age range of the attendees as well as the population of those said cities. And then the reach is how many people will come to the festival itself.
And how did you select these cities?
So we started looking at cities with, again, similar populations as well as that have a thriving festival scene or activity scene, and we wanted to kind of find some in the similar climate zones. So all 3 of these are in the, what's the? It's like 50 lateral. Yeah, it's around the 50 lateral mark, and so trying to find cities in that area.
Perfect, thank you.
So our analysis of the built environment of downtown Medicine Hat revealed some interesting things. We noticed the majority of waste management infrastructure in the area is dedicated to commercial businesses and not actual public space. There's a large number of buildings that have fallen into disrepair, and in multiple areas, these sidewalks have become dilapidated to where they're not necessarily accessible to all populations anymore. There are a good amount of social services available in the area, but in the North Railway District itself, looking in at that area, there are only 4 public trash bins that were identified, and the rest of the trash bins available to the public were provided by independent businesses. And this reveals not just a lack of amenity, but a lack of dedicated spaces for pedestrians in this area.
Counselor Sharps?
Sorry, can we go back to that slide real quick? And I did not wear my glasses, so I cannot see where you are downtown on that slide.
We are in North Railway.
You're in North Railway, okay.
Yes.
Thank you, just wanted to clarify.
Yes, the zoom in is more North Railway, but we took a bit more of a macro scale first to see the difference. All good.
The intent of the design intervention is to turn the North Railway District into a connective tissue through the proposed land management strategy based on agroforestry. So we looked at how underutilized spaces can expand and diversify business operations through different zones of education, implementation, and conservation. A central meandering and winding pathway, which we have termed the Emerald Brook Road, will span down the existing alleyway, allowing for the separation of pedestrian-oriented spaces from the major roadways by implementing more space between pedestrian and vehicular traffic. In addition, excursions would be branching off to smaller, more intimate moments along the path. The redevelopment also proposes the shutting down of the east-west roadways to vehicular flows, apart from service vehicles at certain times during the day for services such as garbage collection or street cleaning to the interior businesses. Railway Ave is also to be lined on either side with angled stalls to allow for more parking while narrowing the roadway to slow down vehicular traffic.
Our site map, as seen here, illustrates how this redevelopment can activate the public realm within the existing context just by differentiating the ground treatment. So the existing underutilized spaces can be converted into areas dedicated to edible native plants and micro farming practices. And this will boost the economic, social, and ecological systems of the city. The residents of Medicine Hat will benefit from having food security in their own backyard, while tourists can come and forage, cultivate, and learn to live off the land as their own personal experience. And we're hoping to connect consumers with local food and offer opportunities to participate directly in the food system. So our massing revolves around this central pathway, our Emerald Brook Road, and then our 3 nodes. So our north node is education, our central node is implementation, and our south node is conservation. And we are using 3 existing brick buildings on site. We elevate all the nodes to allow for this interesting topographical experience, but the north and south nodes have these grass ramps going up and meeting into these existing buildings, and these allow for visitors to come up and actually view the central pathway, as well as seeing having a definitive border on the site on what's going on. But the actual center pathway itself will be lined with a canopy of trees to allow for an intimate experience away from Maple Ave and Railway Ave. And this, excuse me, and then this pathway will be lined with plots, planters, and greenhouses for a foraging trail as you go down. And then eventually, we'll also have incubators for business pop-ups, maker spaces, and other relevant programs that community can come in and participate. Our intention is to activate the central pathway and the 3 nodes, and then allow for these in-between spaces to branch out naturally and to suit the needs of the community over time. So our phasing, our first part is raising the street levels on the interior of the site to meet the sidewalk, and this will prioritize pedestrian safety and mark these areas as pedestrian dominant, so cars will have to slow down. We will relocate the 2 businesses on the north and south nodes, and the root cellar in the central node will remain and just be implemented into our program. We only are proposing to demolish the 1 building, which is currently a sofa land. Yeah, and then, yes, so then we pave our central pathway, and then after that, we will add our greenhouses, planters, and plots along the route of this pathway. And then eventually, too, we can have incubator spaces, and then we have the potential for land bridges off of these elevated areas to where we can go over to the waterway area or even across the railroad. And then for our financial framework strategy, we have an initial city-led development, and this is going to be the main infrastructure. So these are the 3 nodes, which will have the education center will have an agroforestry lab, indigenous practices and traditions and history around it. The central node will have will be food motivated, will teach you classes on how to forage, how to cultivate, and then the conservation node will have like composting and seedling as well. But then after the city-led development, we can have a hybrid city and developer infrastructure going forward. So the city can choose specific programs that they want to implement that the community may want, but then developers can come in and say, hey, I like what they're doing. I'm going to make a brewery that has hops growing in the backyard, or I'm going to have a tea shop that grows mint, licorice, wild bergamot, and chamomile, and those are taken directly from those areas.
Starting to look at some of the sections throughout our site, we've actually cut sections through each of these 3 main nodes, and it kind of depicts the small foraging areas, some of the greenhouses, the seeding and gathering areas, as well as the look-offs and observations. Our intent here was to fill in the existing gaps between the buildings and put a better use to the underutilized spaces that currently exist. The raising of the east-west roads are also evident in these drawings, as it is one continuous elevation. And this is, again, for making it all pedestrian-oriented.
Okay, so we'll finish this presentation off by running through a couple of renderings, starting with this rendering of the north node. So as mentioned, this north node focuses on the idea of education. So we're envisioning that this node could potentially be tied to Medicine Hat College, and it would offer programs to learn about agroforestry and farming techniques, to learn about Indigenous principles. And also, the node is sort of centered around this outdoor farming laboratory, as you can see in the rendering. There will be an architectural feature, which is this ramp that sort of ramps up along the north side of the node, and it'll provide views towards the sort of central pathway. Next, rendering of the central node. So as mentioned, the central node deals with the idea of implementation. So this area, we're envisioning very strong ties to the root cellar, their food program, their test kitchens, and this area will provide opportunities to learn and to implement from the farming techniques learned in the previous node. This area, we're envisioning a very heavy focus on local food opportunities. And as you can see here, sort of these repurposed structures to form this very lively cultural, social, and business space. Next. Lastly, a rendering of the south node. So as mentioned, this node deals with the idea of conservation. We're thinking of wrapping a compost facility, or tying this node to a compost facility and also a seed bank. And also this node would tie to Medicine Hat's existing sort of nut farming greenhouse industries. And then lastly, an overall rendering of our concept, the Emerald Brook Road. And as you can see, it basically consists of this main interstitial pathway that runs through the site, connects the 3 nodes, and it's made up of this, we're thinking this porous brick paving. So it's pedestrian friendly, but you can also drive service vehicles over it. And over time, the cracks in the brick paving, we're envisioning greenery will grow and sort of permeate in between these cracks. Off of this main pathway, we're also envisioning sort of a series of secondary pathways that lead to different excursions. So as you can see here, it's sort of a market excursion, but we're also envisioning local food opportunities, different social excursions, and also a variety of business excursions as well. And one last note, we're also envisioning, as this area sort of develops over time, the existing buildings on site will also get repurposed alongside this redevelopment to become this super lively sort of space. And to conclude, we're hoping that by implementing this series of strategies tied together via our Emerald Brick Road concept, this will be the proper solution moving forwards for Medicine Hat's downtown core. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council regarding this particular piece of the presentation? Councillor Van Dyke?
Not questions, sorry, through the chair, not questions so much as comments. So my other job, I run a food security organization called Community Food Connections, so you're speaking my language with this. And I'm interested seeing all the urban ag and foraging ideas that you had there. And yeah, we see some of these kinds of things happening in other cities around the world. And I think here in Medicine Hat, sometimes we think of agriculture as being the thing that happens outside of the city, but I think there's a lot of opportunity for urban ag here as well, so thank you.
Councillor Knodel?
Thanks, Mayor Clark, through the chair. I just wanted to acknowledge the work that you've done, and I feel a little bit, if you can't see it on my face already, a little bit like a kid in a candy shop watching your presentation. I want to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids myself into that and explore what you've created. I'm highly excited about ideation and the group work that would have had to go into this is phenomenal. So well done, and thank you for injecting energy into a spot in our community that, you know, we obviously need some love. So thanks.
Councillor Dumanowski?
Well, Your Worship, I have some comments, and then I actually do have a question. So first of all, thank you. It's as an educator myself, and Councillor Knodel and all of us passionate about our community, it's nice to see people taking an interest. Hopefully you get some good marks out of this, especially the young lady who wore the green emerald shirt to match her project. So good for you. I noticed that. And all the other ones that don't get the advantage of presenting today. It is exciting to see young minds, new minds, people who are outside the community bringing and overlaying their vision and best practices that we're seeing all over the world, as was evidenced in your first slides. So just kind of imagining this plan over a period of time, do you have a timeline, and maybe that's in the details, but a timeline associated with how this would build out? Is there, what immediate role, if anything, would planning or City Hall have, being that many, if not most of these are public or privately owned facilities or amenities? So how do we fit in? Do we create the vision and then invite them in? What's the first step, if there is a first step, and timelines?
Thank you, Councillor Dumanowski. Our first implementation is this central pathway, which is the alley space anyway, so this is already publicly owned. It would just be revitalized and repaved. But then the few businesses that are in, I'm sure the root cellar would be willing to work with a collaboration, but then the two nodes, the one building is currently not in use, or it looks like a lot of businesses have moved out of there, so the city would just buy that back and then reclaim it. And then the other building as well, it would have to be probably rezoned for a multi-use building and bought from the Pizza Hut that's in there right now. Yeah, but the three main nodes and then the implementation of the central pathway and vegetation is mainly what the city would be doing. And we're hoping that these first steps would start to create like an energy there to where a lot of other private developers would come in and try and start jumping in on these plots and maybe get the greenhouses going and everything else.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no further questions from council, I do have a couple. So when you're talking about underutilized areas, is there a particular definition that you use to define something that's underutilized?
I don't think we had a specific definition in mind, but as we were walking the site, any pieces of land that were either empty or there was piles of garbage or it was overgrown, that's what we considered underutilized spaces.
Thank you. My second question is, how would you relate this back? So we saw the circle graphs, 3 Canadian cities, I believe, and 3 international cities. What did you draw on from those to arrive at this? I think you mentioned that festivals year-round, that kind of thing. So I'm just kind of wondering how those examples played into what you eventually came out with.
So most of the actual festivals or annual events that were held, both within Canada as well as international, most of them had some relation either to food or agriculture. And so we kind of took that overarching idea and brought it back into Medicine Hat, who shares that industry already here.
Thank you. My final question is, how did the proximity of the railway play into your design, if at all? Like it's the railway kind of divides what's basically our entire city center, and I'm just wondering if that was a challenge or how that played into your design.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Clark. We had this central pathway because we noticed that there was a lot of noise coming from Maple Avenue and then the railway. And even though the railway wasn't as noisy as Maple Avenue, it did kick off a lot of like dust. You got some rather things that are kind of uncomfortable to experience while you're there. And so we sort of started to push this central area of getting people to the center, so then the businesses on the exterior wouldn't suffer because then they would have these offshoots, but they would also have this intimate experience where these trees sort of buffer the acoustics, the plants filter the air, so like the overall atmosphere is it's very different and it's a lot better than what's currently there walking on Railway Ave.
Thank you very much. I'm going to just ask if there are any questions from administration, interim city manager Feltham? No? Comments? No? Seeing none? Councillor Knodel?
Please feel free to grab water if you need it. It's there for you.
Excellent job. Thank you so much. This is a really exciting idea, and I'm sure a lot of work, so thank you. And I believe we have yet even another presentation. Are you going to introduce the manager citizens?
Yes, through your worship. So the next project we have is called Loops. We have Maru Kim, Tanita Cherian, and Jeffrey Moore.
Thank you. Welcome. You have the floor. Councillor Hirsch.
Just for clarity, the council never got kind of a rendering on our computers, and it's really difficult for us to see it. So I'm thinking if I could get landmarks to understand what area we're talking about. I presume it's by the overpass, moving along Maple Avenue towards the, say, and maybe you can help me understand. Thanks.
Yeah. So through your worship to Councillor Hirsch, the extent of the study boundary are basically North Railway, Maple Avenue, and then extending from First Street south all the way to where the overpass intersects the railway. So it's a portion of what we're calling the larger city center area redevelopment plan area.
And each of the groups was tasked with a design for that particular area only? Okay.
Yes, Your Worship. We chose that area because it does, as was mentioned earlier, it does receive a little less love than some of the other areas of the community. And it was a very defined study area and had a lot of challenges that were ongoing, so.
Thank you. Welcome, you have the floor.
So, good evening. My name is Tanita, and I'm here today with Jeff and Maru to present our project Loops for the North Railway District in Medicine Hat. The district is currently significantly underused, but has huge potential being located right across the rail yard from the downtown area. So we visited Medicine Hat last month, and during our visit, we noticed that the city was unique in its diverse ecologies. So you have grasslands that have strong winds, valleys that are lush and green, the river that runs across the city. You have forests containing rich biodiversity and dramatic bluffs that are shaped by the warm winds. Also, while walking around the city and chatting with people, we noticed key cultural aspects of the city. So there's a love for the outdoors and outdoor activities. Neighborhoods are generally safe, and it's not uncommon to see children walking around unattended. There's a pride in historic places, and these places are used to spend time with family and friends. There's a strong sense of community, and there's also a strong sense of agency and self-expression in the many small local businesses that you find in the city. So we wanted a way for locals and tourists to experience the full breadth of what Medicine Hat has to offer. So part of our concept for this project is to look beyond the site with the implementation of 3 tourism loops, which you can experience by bike or on foot. So the idea is for visitors to be able to see all sorts of points of interest, to experience the culture of the city, and also to experience the unique ecologies that enrich its landscape. So the first loop is the river loop that runs along the South Saskatchewan River and crosses the river at Finlay Bridge, and also a new Police Point Bridge that would happen at the west end of that loop. There's also the downtown loop through which people could experience the historic downtown. And you also have the North Flats Loop, which connects these 2 tourism nodes, the historic downtown and the Delta Clay District. The North Railway Loop runs across the North Flats Loop runs across the North Railway District. And through our design, the new points of interest would enrich this loop. So the district aims to become...
I apologize. So all of that currently exists except for a bridge across
for the river loop, yes.
Okay. Yeah. Councillor Hirsch, you're on the speakers list. That was a remnant? Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
The district aims to become one of the main attractors along the North Flats Loop. Currently, it contains many barriers and restrictions in regards to access, especially from the downtown area, which is largely cut off by the rail yard there. So our proposed design uses existing networks and links them with the loop experience. There are 3 main nodes which act as community hubs. And to break up the monotony of the long linear district, a variety of landscapes based on the city's various ecologies have been placed along the site to divide it into a series of ecological experiences.
So the result essentially is a district full of amenity that looks to encourage both the surrounding community as well as Medicine Hat as a whole to interact with not only the site, but the loops that were discussed previously. So the ground plane of the site essentially would consist of, like many other places around the world, it's just mostly commercial units, and that's where you're sort of interacting with that sort of landscape environment. But then there is a raised walkway that would then connect all of the buildings, sort of creating a new way of moving through the space. This does a few things. It would essentially create a point of attraction on the site itself. Having that loop, there's a couple other precedents of cities around the world, which I'll show in a second, that use loops as attraction points to sort of bring people to the site. But it also allows upper stories of those buildings to act sort of more part of the public realm, whether they're also commercial, whether they're residential. It sort of creates more amenity within that space, and likely within that raised walkway there would be amenity as well. So if we look at the Rotterdam rooftop walk, they actually used existing buildings and just added infrastructure to those buildings to essentially create new activities on the top of those roofs, as well as create sort of more usable space for the public. And then the Forest and Sports Park by Taller Architects essentially is very similar to ours in the sense where it's a very urban park that they've placed within the city, and then they actually use a similar walkway to encourage people who maybe don't want to use the park for the sports facilities portions of it, but just to use it as sort of a tourism node or a reason to go see that park itself. So on our site, the raised walkway as well as the flanking buildings act to sort of put emphasis on that central park, if you will, and the historic buildings that we'd be keeping within the site. And the result is essentially a very linear park that looks to incorporate a lot of the things that we mentioned previously that Medicine Hat has to offer. And when we started designing a lot of the park itself, we started looking at the biodiversity of the park and how a lot of the soil right now is very contaminated within that site and due to the train yard. So we started looking at different plants that we could incorporate within that space to start remediation and sort of making that soil easier to use further down the road. So through that linear park, then we were sort of healing the site, if you will. And the final result essentially was a section of rivers near the middle, valleys and forests on either end of that, and then grasslands and bluffs. And the reason for this is we were using essentially inspiration from transportation nodes or transportation routes that we saw happening. So we'd be introducing an at-grade train crossing on 3rd Street, so it's easier to move across that site. Similar to many other cities, essentially arms close down when you're not supposed to cross, and they lift up when you're ready to cross. It just makes it much more intuitive to move from one side of that railway to the other. And then a pedestrian overpass near 5th. So the closer you get to those nodes, the more biodiversity the landscape would have. And then as you make your way further away from that central space, you sort of feel the gradient of climates, I guess, or ecologies changing as you move through the space. So starting with the grasslands, essentially it would contain a lot of open vacant spaces for festivals and activities, and it also acts as the central node for the tourism loops that were mentioned previously. And then moving down to the valley section, it would contain essentially a set of sunken landforms that would act as bioswales and site drainage for that site. So when it rains, or whether we're trying to store water or just treat water itself, it would move through this space. And then in the winter, that space would then change itself into something where that is used by the community, whether it's sledding or parks, or if basketball courts turn into outdoor skating rinks, trying to create a very social amenity. And then the river section essentially contains a set of flowing bodies of water that use the historic buildings of Medicine Hat sort of as landforms that essentially push water around the site. And then the spaces that are created in between these sort of streams would then become patios or plazas or spaces that are usable essentially year-round. And then, so the forest section, moving next, is essentially a set of dense trees with clearings that can be used as public amenity, market spaces, festivals, and in this section, the raised walkway actually tiers down and becomes seating. So whether there's performances going on or it's simply just seating for that public market, it sort of, that attraction of that loop sort of touches down and interacts with the ground plane. And then finally moving on to the tail end of the site, which would be our bluff section. This is sort of the furthest south on that North Railway District. And it becomes sort of a sort of more open, like multi-use site, whether it's pop-up shops, just going for your walk, or whether there's sort of pop-up events that are going on. This bluff space is just sort of meant to be an open space that can kind of be used by anything that it needs to be used by. And these bluffs look towards the bluffs of, I believe that's the Southeast Hill neighborhood. So it sort of has that reference across the train yard, seeing those bluffs. I'll pass it on to Maru here.
Thanks. So one way we saw this district being developed is through a 4-phase strategy. The first phase would be to construct that promenade or that linear urban park, as well as the connective infrastructures, including the at-grade train crossing, the pedestrian overpass, and additional crossings on Maple Avenue, as well as the implementation of the tourism loops. The next phase would be to construct that elevated loop that would weave in and around existing buildings using rooftops as terraces, occasionally here and there. And then using the elevated walkway as sort of a infrastructure, we see empty lots and existing buildings being replaced with new development that sort of plug into those elevated walkway conditions. And then the final phase would be as one by one all these lots are filled, you have a complete railway district neighborhood. So one way we saw these individual developments being financed would be potentially a real estate investment fund, where the city would lead the development of each of these plots and provide that initial capital for construction. But along the way, community members can invest into the development almost like a mutual fund. And that would free up some capital for the city, essentially creating another loop in the financial model. And we're hoping that this loop perpetuates more development down the line. And as these properties generate income through rents and mortgages, perhaps community members can see a return on their investments, maybe perhaps a little bit more for those who are in low income or refugee status. And there are precedents for these kinds of real estate investment funds in the US on a neighborhood scale, such as in Albina or in Echo Park. And it really makes sense for this neighborhood because these sorts of projects have a higher community acceptance for newer development. It works to reduce generational wealth gap, and it would encourage community members, especially those who invest in the neighborhood, to visit the railway district. Thanks very much for your attention and your time.
Thank you very much. We'll open it up for questions. Councilor Dubanowski.
Your worship, go ahead. You were going to start.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I really love the idea of remediation through vegetation and that dual role that it serves of not only providing a lovely built environment that kind of is integrated with nature, but also, you know, at the same time, it has another job, a side gig, kind of remediating some of the contamination, which is a fairly big issue, not just in our city, but in others that are adjacent to old industrial railway, that kind of thing. So I really liked that. The question I had was about the at-grade rail crossing. Is that typical for the type of rail traffic we have in our area, or in that particular area?
Yeah, actually, a pretty good example is, I guess a lot of us are from Calgary, so we're used to that. There's a very similar situation of a rail yard that essentially narrows down to two rails, I guess, if you want to call it that. And it is pretty common. It happens, I think, like 3 or 4 times along the Bell Line, essentially in Calgary. And I think the reason it works so perfect is because you guys still have First Street that goes under. I think that's First Street, right? That still goes under. So say someone is in a rush and the arms come down and cars can't pass, they still have that second route to get around. The at-grade crossing essentially just makes it like much more intuitive. If there is no rail traffic, there's nothing stopping you from walking across. It's also much safer. It feels a lot more like comfortable to do that move, and it is done all over the place. So, yeah.
Thank you. Very interesting concept. Thank you, Councilor Dubanowski.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, another interesting project. I smiled largely at the idea of a pond across from the Corona Hotel, just not because I didn't want to believe your idea, but it was, for a hatter all my life, it felt a little sensational. But when I started to see it brought in and tie into the broader vision you have in context, and that's the challenge. When you live here all your life, I love this city, and I can see so many things and speak to its history, but I have a certain lens that I'm biased by because I've lived here all my life. And someone like you coming in can not remove all those distractions and kind of see it for something new and different. So my question is 2 questions. One, it looked like, and correct me if I'm wrong, in some of your system, it looks like some of the historic buildings may actually be demoed. And I'm not trying to get controversial, but does that require some demolition of some of the historic buildings along the North Railway itself, facing North Railway?
Yes, so our proposal would be to demolish much of the historic buildings, especially along the Railway Avenue, except of course the train station. The reason is that a lot of these historic or more historic buildings are a lot smaller, and so it'd be difficult to find somebody to purchase the building and then refurbish it because they just end up with sort of a small property. So we thought the good ones to keep would be the Corona and the Cecil, and those have fairly large square footage for what they are. And there would be in such a central sort of position along that urban park that the value of that property would be very high and very desirable.
Thank you. My follow-up is, so part of this is, as you kind of developed this project, was there any requirement or consultation or conversation with existing businesses, or was that completely removed from your mandate? Not that you want to go up to them and say, by the way, we see your building being demoed someday in our project, but did you have conversations with any of the existing businesses by accident or by intentionality, I guess? And just curious what kind of feedback you got.
I guess I would say when we were here in Medicine Hat as a class, because we only came here once, we were kind of here on a rare off weekend of not great weather. A lot of things were closed and we didn't have a lot of chance to talk to a ton of people. So I don't think we had that specific conversation about like what our view was of that space. Also at the time, we had no idea of what our project was or where we were going to go with or what our ideas were. But I think we did draw a lot of inspiration from conversations we had, whether they were cab drivers or workers at restaurants. I think that was sort of where we started our design process. But in terms of removing buildings or things like that, that wouldn't have fallen into the conversation yet.
So you need to come back when the weather's nice. You came back again when it's not so nice, but it's usually
Just
quite
luck of the
nice.
draw, I
here.
guess.
Sunny city in Canada. So welcome and thank you again.
Councillor Knodel.
Thanks, Mayor Clark, through the chair. So same comments off the bat. It's really, really neat to see how much brain power and collaboration went into this project. So well done to your team. Just a couple things that I liked or am intrigued about. So I really liked your stylized rendering. I thought that was neat. And at the beginning, you have attention to the details of our community and the things that Medicine Hat has to offer. And you clearly made those assumptions and observations in a short amount of time. And that's helpful, and both helpful and illuminating to what we're, as a community, we're doing right and where we need to put more energy into. And you're showing us some things that can improve, and that's really neat. Like Councillor Dumanowski, seeing the space in a different way, because I too have lived here all my life minus a few years. It's really cool to see what the potential is in a space that's that I see every day or almost every day. I have two questions. The first is I would like to know how this project came to be and whether it was on, and maybe you don't have the answer, but Robert or your teachers could help me understand. And then the second one is, would there be copyright or ownership on your ideas, or can the city just, because of the project, we're just gonna take an idea from that map? And like, I know that, Robert was saying something along that line, so maybe you could help me with those.
Go ahead, and then if you can't, the parts you can't answer, we'll just turn over to Manager Sissons.
Yes, so the one thing I think I can answer is there are no copyrights. I think this is, this is sort of a, I think this would be a sort of a gift to City of Medicine Hat, I believe, yeah.
So that's beautiful and brilliant, and thank you for the work that you've done.
And in terms of how the project came to be, it's just a mix of things that happen over time. I feel like the process is like, it's never a straight line. It kind of veers this way and then it comes back this way. So I don't think there's one way to answer that.
Do you know how the whole concept of collaborating between the school and City of Medicine Hat happened?
All right, Manager Sissons.
So through your worship to Councillor Knodel. So this project kind of came about when we were working with University of Calgary's same group on another project that coming to completion end of summer as well. So that's another one that looks more at the whole city and where we have underutilized spaces. And it's more of like an inventory project. So when Alberto was down with that project, we kind of got to talking, and typically this project is done more internationally. And because of the circumstances, we said, you know, this would be a really fun project to do. They could use some of the existing data work that they've been collecting. And so it kind of just rolled from there. So that became that collaboration between the city and the University of Calgary.
Thank you for doing that work, and thank you to you as teachers or professors for, it's a lot of work to do what you're doing with your group, so I really appreciate it. It's a gift. It really is a gift to our city, so thank you.
Councillor Sharps.
So first, thank you. The presentations were equally good. They were fantastic. I loved listening to them. So, but listening was the key word. I was unable to see it. So I've got a favor now that I know it's not copyright. Manager Sissons, would it be possible to get copies of the presentations? Because I'd like to re-listen to this on YouTube, listen to you guys giving the presentations with the pictures in front of me. I know, I need pictures. So that would be really helpful for me. And then I may have follow-up questions that I'd like to send. But right now it was all, and you were a great storyteller, so it was good. I was able to visualize it, but short attention span. So I need the picture in front of me.
So through your worship, absolutely. We will be circulating the full PDFs that are high resolution. It's just in a presentation environment, some of these graphics don't always come across 100%. But yes, you will get a full PDF, and they will also be on display at the Esplanade and the city website for the public as well. So,
just a point of clarification. All of the presentations will be on display at the Esplanade?
correct.
Do you know what dates they'll be on display?
They were already being mounted kind of as we were leaving. We were there this afternoon, all afternoon, kind of doing the final presentation. So they were mounting the posters, and then all the models will be up on the second level.
That's exciting. Thank you. Councillor Hyder.
Thank you, Mayor Clark, through the chair. First of all, I feel old, but first of all, you're very inspiring young people to have the innovation and the creativity to not be from here and to come to our community and have these visions. It's very admirable to me. So thank you. And I echo, I am a Hatter and have lived here all my life. So it is refreshing to see something different when you've seen it your whole life. So thank you for doing that. I'm going to warn you on something, though. The man, Robert Sissons, his father, Malcolm, is a huge historical building person in our community. So be careful what buildings you want to knock down. You better check with Senior Sissons there. But thank you very much for your time.
Councillor Van Dyke.
Yes, thank you. I had a question. So a lot of these designs have large open public spaces, and I'm wondering from an urban design side, what kind of a population you need to support large spaces like that? Like, is there a tipping point? Because if you create all these big spaces and there's not enough people using them, it would look kind of more like an abandoned space. So I'm wondering if there's some kind of algorithms or metrics you guys use.
No, at least at our point, I think that's like a really big question that I think comes up all the time. I think it's a similar ratio, or not a similar ratio, but a similar idea to why a lot of buildings are vacant now, right? Like, is it, if you don't have the critical mass to essentially fill that space, it won't be filled. And I'm not sure what's more successful, open space that needs people or buildings that are empty because there's not enough people. So I think that's a very good question, but I don't think there's an easy way, at least at our point, to answer that, I'd say.
Councillor McGrogan.
Thank you. Through the chair, just quickly, I was the council member that attended the morning that you started this, so a couple observations. One is, I can't believe how much work got done between opening morning and now, so very well done. Thank you for the presentations. I really want to see the rest of the presentations. You really tweaked my interest, and I thank you on behalf of council at the beginning, and not my place to do it now, but thank you so much.
Thank you. Councillor Hirsch.
Yeah, I just want to, thank for everyone that made their contributions known, that, and I actually might make a point to do a tour to see them all. You know, you heard it as well, a lot of people that are from Medicine Hat, and it's kind of like forest for the trees. You know, we kind of see it forever, and it's kind of the same old, same old. So it is quite invigorating to see it from a different perspective and a different set of eyes. I do have a very practical question, because I'm a little bit more of a financial miser, and I was intrigued with the real estate, and I'm also a banker, so you got me on the real estate investment side of things too. But from the urban space that you're talking about, I'm thinking maintenance. So you've got new urban spaces, fantastic. Is it an element of xeriscaping? Is it an element of I saw a lot of return kind of to natural with the plains, with the bluffs, et cetera. So help me understand what the level of maintenance would be for us as a city, which of course attracts a little bit of investment on our end as far as maintenance goes. So maybe help me with that.
Sorry, is this maintenance of the buildings or the maintenance of the landscape? Yeah, so
landscape.
we looked at different plant types. So that's like shrubs and trees and grasses and things like that that could remediate the soil. And so a lot of that comes from the plants itself. And yeah, so maintenance, I don't think we looked that closely at like the labor that would go into it,
Okay.
but more so what the plants would do for the soil itself. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And then, you know, it's amazing, both concepts had an elevated walking point. So, you know, quite literally, you're taking a different perspective of the city just by elevating and having a different viewpoint. So I found that quite fascinating, to be honest. Love the comparisons to other cities that have done it. You know, I was actually infatuated even going down Stephen Avenue in Calgary, where you have the intertwining of buildings where you walk right through and all of a sudden you're in a gym and the next one you're at a coffee shop. So, you know, I love the idea of incorporating different levels, like you said, on the urban walk. So it certainly illuminated my thoughts in terms of what could be there, as opposed to kind of waiting for, I guess, the market forces to come into play and have their own development ideas, right? So this is a little bit more of a nudge from the City of Medicine Hat, care of your group, to say this is our vision, and then you're right, you have developers that say, okay, I understand now, I want to play ball. So yeah, thank you for your work, all of you. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hirsch. That brings up one more question I had when I was watching it. When you're talking about the rooftop, it's not bridges, but the pathway that would be along the rooftops, is that in, I don't know if you looked into the ownership or maintenance models of those, but if you have, is that like a strata model or a co-op or just a lease of the top of the building, or have you seen any particular model?
Thank you for your question. To put it shortly, we did not look into how the ownership would work for the walkways. We saw them as something the city would develop, which would enhance the urban park, which would increase the property value there and pique the interest of developers, or maybe certain developments could be city-led through a real estate investment fund. That's what we're thinking. Thank you.
Thank you. That was maybe a little tricky one. Manager Citizens, do you have any additional comments?
Yeah, so through your worship, I would just add that there are a lot of precedents. So whether it's Calgary or other, Winnipeg has underground ones. So there are various models that you could look at. A lot of what was presented could also be on public land, so it would be very easy for the city to maintain 100% ownership. But those types of things usually, because they attract a lot of people, if you're like as an example in Calgary where they would have a +15, that's a really big boost for a business, having that foot traffic. So it's generally something that they want, and they would try and facilitate, so.
Thank you. Councillor Dumanowski?
Your Worship, I know we've spent lots of time on this, to Manager Citizens, actually. We have an existing River Flats redevelopment plan, imagining that this did not take that into consideration as an exercise unto itself, but do you see any, you kind of mentioned, and I'll look forward to your ideas or thoughts that can be extracted from these varied presentations and married into those plans. Is that kind of the genesis of what you were thinking, that there would be some ideas that could be taken out and then added to or complement the existing plan?
So through your worship to Councillor Dumanowski, 100%. So we have, for example, our downtown plan that does cover that area as well. We have the River Flats area redevelopment plan, which both of those plans are approximately 10 to 12 years old at this point. The idea with this project was to kind of get some new, fresh ideas. I would 100% guarantee you when we do that city center area redevelopment plan that we would pull elements from those plans as well. What's worked, what hasn't worked, and as well as from a lot of these projects, we would see, okay, how can we blend in, an element from the first one with an element from the second one, and some public feedback on it as well. So a lot of times these plans come from the ideas come from various different sources, and you just try and blend them all together. But a lot of the precedent has been set by those plans and where we got to today, and we would have some track record on what's worked and what hasn't.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments from administration? Interim City Manager Feltham.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. First of all, I love working with students. It's been much of my career. When I think of these types of presentations and the impact they can have, it really relates to impacting our understanding of the possible. And for me, both presentations very, very much did that. So as we think about what our city can become, sort of the kernels that were planted today, I think will allow us to move forward and think in different ways. And in that way, I would very much like to thank all of the students and the faculty members involved. Wonderful exercise. And I think what was heard here today, the kernels of it will impact our city into the future. So thank you.
Thank you. And I would also just like to commend Manager Citizens and our Planning and Development Services Department for having taking the initiative and having the foresight to engage in something like this. That's just been such a benefit to us, and I really appreciate that. I think all of council would agree. So thank you. With that, I will enter.
Your Worship, I'll move the presentations for reception.
Second.
All right, we will vote on reception. And that's unanimous. Thank you. And Manager Citizens gets to stick around for another presentation. He's going to be presenting item 7.2, Direct Control Development Permit, PLD P20220296. And this is in relation to item 8.1, which is a non-statutory public hearing on the same development permit. You have the floor. Sorry.
Yes, thank you. So as Mayor Clark mentioned, this is for council approval of PLD P20220296. So I'll just give a quick presentation overview. So I'll discuss basically the site context, some of the application details, and policy context. I'll then show a few photos from the site and provide administrative recommendation. So the subject site there is highlighted in yellow. It's located along Industrial Avenue. Just as you're crossing over the creek, it's going to be on your right-hand side. This is a oblique image of the site looking towards the south. So the portion of the building where the development is occurring is highlighted by the orange arrow there. So the proposal is for the partial conversion of bay number 7 into an office suite. The existing space is essentially an overheight garage space. So that what they'll be doing is they'll be adding a second floor within that space where that office is going to be located. As defined in the land use bylaw, a business and professional office is a development where the principal use is administrative, consulting, financial, information management, or other type of professional work. So the land use district, so the zoning for this site is direct control, so council is the approving authority for development permits. The site is located within the creek floodway and flood fringe. However, the building footprint is only within the flood fringe. Prior to construction, a report is required as a condition of approval, which basically from a qualified engineer who will review the plans and just ensure that that additional load on the foundation won't be negatively impacted in the event of a flood. So the site does contain a very wide mix of commercial and industrial land uses, which is one of the reasons why it is zone direct control. As you can tell from that list, there's already several of the, at least a large portion of the building that is already office, including businesses such as World Financial Group, the Ian Moxon Architect, Four Pillars Consulting, Enviro Geotech Construction. So this isn't a large departure from what already exists there. The adjacent zoning and land uses do include the two creeks where they join together, which is to the north, and that's zoned open space. CP Railways is directly to the south, and that is zoned as direct control. There's a city municipal yard further to the east, which is zoned direct control as well. And then Mudrack Construction, or Concrete, sorry, and is directly adjacent to the west with Seven Persons Creek further over. And that's zoned direct control and open space respectively. So that didn't quite make it as well into the presentation as I thought it was going to, but the previous council plans are included here, and specifically why we did that is because when this application happened, we were still under the previous strategic plans. But if we fast forward to today, how this ties into our current strategic plan is that resilience and sustainability section, so specifically 6.8, which looks at things like infill and brownfield redevelopment, which I would say that this meets both of those criteria. So there isn't specific guidance from the MDP, so the Municipal Development Plan, when it comes to this particular area. It's considered special use typology, meaning that a lot of the uses are not uniform. So an example would be of a uniform typology would be a suburban neighborhood where you have all the same types of uses. This portion of the river flats is very unique. It's got Medelta, it's got various other historical industrial uses, and I would describe it as undergoing that incremental transformation from previous industrial uses to more of a commercial and tourism focus. And the same could be said for the River Flats Area Redevelopment Plan. It did talk about this being more of a complete integrated neighborhood. So a lot of these sites, when we talk about area redevelopment plans, as was the last presentation, it does take a while for those things to start to transition. And this is, I guess, one example of that, where it is slowly transitioning away from what used to be more of an industrial site to more of a quasi-industrial commercial building. So this is just a little bit of a view from the eastern portion of the front of Ross Creek Business Park, which is what the name of the whole development area is. Here's the west portion of the front of the building. So this is if you're heading out of town on Industrial Ave, and the site is basically to your right at this point. This looks at the entrance to the site. There's a little bit more of a close-up of the entrance. So that's the exterior of the proposed office suite, is the area within those two overhead doors. Here's just an interior view looking out from the space. So you can see that the height of the building it's got a really high ceiling right now, so they basically would be adding that second floor within that space. And here's another view looking towards the back of that space.
I apologize. We're missing the flipping. So this is the front view. There was an interior view and a...
My apologies. I'm trying to run presentation on here.
Nope. Perfect.
So
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just restart from this part. So this is the looking out towards the main doors of the interior of the space. And here's looking to the back of the interior of the space. So you can see, like I said, the height of the building or the ceiling is quite high. It allows for basically 2 stories to be built within that space. This is the rear parking facilities. There's also quite a bit of parking on site in the front throughout the site, as well as some parking for more of the industrial vehicles. So they are separated from each other. So staff's recommendation is, it is recommended through the Municipal Planning Commission that City Council approve development permit PLDP 2022-0296, subject to the listed conditions. That concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Hirsch.
Well, Your Worship, it's interesting. Councillor McGrogan and I actually had the opportunity as MPC members to go and visit the property, and I noticed the applicants here in the building. You know, as you can see in the pictures, a very nice, well-maintained piece of property, adequate parking, you know, just a simply array of contrasting businesses. And just like we had the previous presentation was about maybe giving it a nudge, here we've got market forces coming into play that are saying, hey, I think we could have this here, a little bit industrial, a little bit of commercial, a little bit of retail, all kind of working in harmony. And so I do understand the concept is why we have it at DC. It does make sense. I mean, way back in the day, it was all industrial, that whole zone, quite frankly. And now it's kind of pleasing to the eye to see a little bit of reinvestment in that area. And as we know, it's like a momentum builder. As you reinvest, people get attracted. As people get attracted, more reinvestment occurs. So really happy to see it. Was happy to see it at MPC. Was very comfortable to move it forward. You know, again, I just want to reiterate the fact that what we were looking for is exactly what we're looking from our visionary standpoint is brownfield, is re-engineering, reconfiguring, rethinking what we have already. So I definitely like the application and comfortable with it. Thank you.
Councillor Knodel.
Thanks, Mayor Clark, through the chair. So I'm just going to walk through a couple of the thoughts that came into my mind when I read through this on the package, and then I have a couple questions. So, so the thought that as I was reading, I'm reading that it's in not the floodplain, but the flood fringe. So that I go into, okay, what temporary measures can be employed during a flood to help these businesses or this particular lot if necessary. And I saw that it was built into the agreement that the person that is responsible for that bay would have to evaluate flood protection measures. So that was great to see. And then it was this. And maybe you can help me understand, was it this bay in general that no healthcare facility or office could be part of? Because I know there's that integrated health, and then there's the spa that's in that building as well. So is it public health that can't go in that space, or is it, can maybe help me understand that?
So through your worship to Councillor Knodel, because it is zone direct control, council does have full discretion to allow any use they see fit for that site.
Follow-up question? Okay, so in general, does it just apply to this bay or the whole space?
So through your worship to Councillor Knodel, it would apply, this particular permit applies to just that bay. The rest of the development is already permitted and in operation.
Okay, and was this building at one time the indoor skate park?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
It's gone through multiple uses over the years. I think there was some public, it was before I personally moved back here, so, but prior to that, it was an industrial facility and so on. So it's been around for quite a while.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's come a long way since the time of that, and it's nice to see, just the same as I mentioned to the students that put some energy into re-envisioning, it's nice to see love and attention go to spaces that didn't have it before, so thanks.
Councillor Robbins?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Clark, through the chair. Manager Assistants, I'm looking at the background staff report, and I just want to make sure I understand, I'm on page 2 of it, what the conditions are, because you had mentioned the first conditions. I'm going to take my glasses off because I'm old. The professional, registered engineering professional outlining the flood proofing, that's condition number 1. 2 is essentially there's a site development plan and all conditions of development have to be completed. And then the third one is about utilities being at the developer's expense. Those are the 3 terms of the permit. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Sharps?
Thank you. I just had a quick question. Is this direct control because it's in the flood fringe? I'm just trying to understand why it's direct control.
So through your worship to Councillor Sharps, it's two-part. So previously the site was zoned, if we kind of rewind about, not quite a decade, but it was zoned industrial at that time. The owner did want to see a little bit of a change in the approach to the business model of the site. It is quite a large site, so at that point, one of the only ways to do that is through direct control, where you can have potentially might be viewed as conflicting land uses in a lot of conventional zoning. So that's part 1. Part 2 is because it is within the floodway and flood fringe.
One quick follow-up. So on that one condition that Councillor Robbins was talking about, I saw that with the utilities. So if the utilities doesn't work out, do you end up having to come back here in front of us, or is it just a workable solution after that?
So through your worship to Councillor Sharps, no, that particular condition is standard on all development permit conditions, basically, where it's just, as construction is occurring in the field, or if there's minor changes to the configuration of the utilities, that it is at the applicant's expense, and it's not going to be our utilities that have to pay for those relocations or additional services. Yeah.
All right. Seeing no more questions, I just wanted to comment how helpful I found the pictures. That really helps contextualize where the site is and the building itself. And I also really appreciated you pointing out how it links in with our current strategic plan. And I appreciate you coming here, and you were up there a long time, so now you can rest.
So I will move the permit. Sorry.
You moving it? I'll second it.
Oh, Councillor Dumanowski, I apologize. Did I miss you?
Oh, Your Worship, I pulled back. I'm
Okay.
saving time tonight.
So Councillor Hirsch moves it, and Councillor McGrogan seconds it, and we will vote. And the presentation is received unanimously. All right, now we'll move on to item 8.1, and this is the non-statutory hearing for proposed direct control development permit application, PLD P20220296, change of use at 851 Industrial Avenue Southeast. As was previously mentioned, this is a direct control lot, which is why we do a non-statutory hearing. So we just need to get a motion for it to be approved, and then we'll vote on that. Oh, does anyone, if there was anyone in the chamber who would like to speak for or against the development permit, please come down and state your name. For a second time, if there's anyone who would like to speak for or against the development permit, please come down and state your name at the podium. For a third and final time, if there's anyone who would like to speak for or against the development permit, please come down to the podium and state your name. And I would also ask City Clerk Robinson if there was any items received on this matter written.
We did not.
So please come forward and state your name.
My name's Dennis Mudrock. I'm the developer, and I am for the development. I'm just here if you have any questions. Thanks.
Councillor Knodel?
Just a comment. You are Mudrock, the company, correct? You are the
Yeah,
company.
me and my brother own it.
I just want to say that you are an active participant in our community, and thank you for the work that you do and those who you employ.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, seeing no questions, I declare this public hearing, non-statutory public hearing closed. Thank you. Okay. So now we need a motion.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Any debate? Seeing none, we will vote. And that's approved unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to reports. Item 9.1, Administrative Committee meeting dated June 8th, 2022. And the item for adoption on that, in that report is a request for proposal number CMH 2256, LM 2500 plus DLE hot section replacement. And this is a sole source, so requires council adoption.
I'll move that report for adoption as indicated.
Second.
City Clerk, did you, I apologize. I believe you had a typo for correction.
I just wanted to point out that on page 50 of the package, under the recommendation, it should read to the satisfaction of the city manager and city solicitor rather than city council.
All right, so Councillor Van Dyke?
Thank you. Through the chair, I had a question about this. So I'm just wondering the thinking behind having a contract for a single, I realize when I say single, it's an enormous job, versus like a long-term service contract. If there's really, if GE is the best company to be doing the work, would we not just always have them do the work versus putting out RFPs every time we need work done?
Managing Director Mock.
Through your worship to Councillor Van Dyke, one of the primary reasons why this is done more on a cyclical basis rather than an ongoing contract is to try to secure more favorable pricing rather than longer term contracting. This item is being, that the recommended bidder is the OEM manufacturer of this unit. And we're the only bidders for this unit as part of this. but it is an ongoing item that is done approximately every 25,000 hours of service time.
Councillor Dumanowski?
Your Worship, it's a good question, and certainly I'm not the author of a good answer, but I'll give my shot. I mean, single source or specialized, for specialized services like a generation unit has historically been sole source because it is a very expensive piece of equipment that is brand specific to a large extent. My overall kind of summary would be that we've been able to procure favorable, fair costs associated with sole source. We are in the business of energy, and so our equipment is going to end up falling into that category often, if not every time. And so to the acting managing director's comments, it really comes down to not only following the procurement or RFP process, regardless of it being very specific equipment, but trying to create a very transparent, open condition that both to the community who pays for this, the ratepayer, but also GE, that we are following our rules and regulations, and we I don't want to say command, but we want to generate a favorable and fair response, and I think we're achieving that here. So you'll probably likely see more of this in the future, but certainly this is a good exercise.
Seeing no further questions, Councillor Dumanowski, can I request that you move it as amended? Just there's that one typo that was corrected by us.
Sure, I'll move that as amended.
Second.
All right, we will vote. And that's unanimous. Moving on to item 8.2, Audit Committee meeting, June 9th, 2022. All items are for information.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Any questions or comments? Councillor Robbins.
Sorry about that. Got a little trigger happy there. I do have a couple of questions, if you don't mind indulging me in them. I had 8 comments, but I don't think I have 8 questions. The first one, and I'll tell you the page that I'm on, I'm looking at the triannual report just to make sure that I understand what I'm looking at, and I am on page 9. And my question, I think, is for Managing Director Eggert, would probably be the one in the best position to answer it. So I noticed all of the notes, which I really appreciate understanding where there's variance in budget and why the notes might be there. So I've seen through it a lot of unfavorable due to COVID-related downturn in like attendance or ridership or things like that. And then I see, sorry, I've just picked this random page, but it's in all of the notes. And then I see favorable due to staff vacancies. And so these are not, just so I want to make sure I understand, these are not eliminated positions because of accelerated financial, these are actual vacancies. So that's part A of my question.
So through the chair, Councillor Robbins, that's correct. These are positions that we're actively recruiting or plan to actively recruit. During this period, they just happen to be vacant, and so that would be a favorable variance for that department during that period.
So my next question is, in the budget, is there a vacancy discount built into the budget? Or is this why I'm getting the notes?
Through the chair, Councillor Robbins, we do have a vacancy allowance throughout the whole year, acknowledging that we do have a certain percentage of positions that are under recruitment, and that's approximately 4% or 4.2%. That is already built into the budget for each department. So when you're seeing these vacancies, that's part of what you're seeing here is we're trying to predict that. We are seeing higher than normal vacancies during this time. There's some positions that are very hard to recruit for example, and there's other reasons as well. So I hope that answers the question.
It does. Thank you very much. Could I ask and go on to my rest of my list here? My next question, I believe, is for Acting Managing Director Mouch, who's looking at me like, I just got here, lady. I want to talk about sewer, if that's okay with you. So I'm looking at, what page? Page 10, page 69 of the package, but, sorry, page 11 of the report. This is the Energy and Infrastructure Capital Report. I just think as taxpayers, we often concentrate, or certainly before I sat at this horseshoe, about what we can see but not what we can't. And so I just wanted to say that I'm very impressed with the scope of the projects and how accurate the budgets have been. I know that to me shows a real expertise in predicting needs and preparing for them. And so I appreciated reading all of this. But my question on this page is about the Briar Park gravity bypass. It's mentioned twice here, of course, under surface or under sewage and underwater, and I just don't know a lot about that project. So I don't need like a huge overview, but just like give me the sense of what that one's about.
Certainly, through your worship to Councillor Robbins. The Briar Park Gravity Bypass Project is a multi-year project, approximately spanning 7 construction years. It began with the upgrade of the Crescent Heights lift station near Police Point Park and extends through Riverside up to Briar Park. Really what the intention is to increase the capacity in that area. It was seen as an innovative project coming from city assets, upgrading that area rather than going along the north section, which would have been a much larger linear length and would have required an additional lift station. So it is an innovation project, but it's meant to provide additional capacity in that whole area. With respect to the water portion of that, typically what city assets likes to do, as many projects, many departments, is if we try to minimize the impact to our customers. So we don't want to dig up a road more than once. So if we are digging up a road to replace the sewer, we would want to replace the water as well, including any stormwater or any other utility infrastructure as well, to try to minimize the impact to the customers. Hence why there will be multiple projects and multiple business units with the same name.
So thank you for that. So in the 7-year project, what year is it in?
I believe we're in year 3 now.
And I have another question on that same page, sorry. There's a reference to water systems reinforcement and replacement asset management. Can you just tell me the difference between those two terms?
Through worship to Councillor Robbins, water systems reinforcement is more a capacity building exercise, whereas asset management is an in-kind replacement of infrastructure.
Got it, perfect. And just a couple more. I am now on page City Operations, Building and Fleet Services. I'm very grateful you're here because I know that you'll appreciate this because I think you might have had a hand in this. I just want to say this is, sorry, the page is page 24. Appendix A, it says, I just want to say this is the most epic pie chart I've ever seen in my life. I don't know what it all means, and someday I'll want to talk to someone about it, but I just love the detail of what's going on with the fleet. It makes me really reassured that someone's keeping a very close eye on all of these things.
Councillor Robbins, what's the typed page number in the center?
No, I'm on page 104 of the package. Yeah.
Thank you.
I had several other questions, but I think I can wait for the next time we get a triannual report because I'm sure that'll make better sense to me as I continue to receive them. And I think I'll tune into the audit committee sometime and see if that detail comes out. But thank you very much for your answers.
Councillor Knodel?
Thanks, Mayor Clark, through the chair. These are just some general questions. First one is probably best suited for Managing Director Eggert. So, and then likely the second one too. So the first is through Mayor Clark to, can I do that? Okay, to Managing Director Eggert. So it says on page, so this is page 56 that I kind of, the light bulb question went off, and then page 77 is where I'm getting to. So anyways, per the Municipal Government Act, the city is required to remain within the debt to revenue percentage of 100% of revenue. Does this mean total debt can only equal total yearly revenue?
So through the chair, Councillor Knodel, for the city of Medicine Hat, that debt limit is calculated as 2 times our revenue. So that would be the 100% limit is 2 times our annual revenue, which is the revenue is approximately $460 million. So times 2, that'd be 920 million would be our limit. And so then our actual debt is measured against that limit.
Thanks. Can I ask a follow-up? Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. Is that, okay, I'm going to ask another question. I have one more after that. So is that specific to Medicine Hat as a municipality because of the organization being unique?
So through the chair to Councillor Knodel, yes. I think there's a few municipalities in Alberta that have a unique ratio attached to them. City of Medicine Hat would be one of those. And it largely relates to our utility businesses that our debt is used for that as well. So we have, instead of 1.5 annual revenues, our limit is actually 2 times our annual revenues.
Thank you. And through Mayor Clark to Managing Director Eggert, my last question. On page 79, we discuss loans to external organizations. Do we have the dates of the original loans and when they were granted? Because I know we have the maturity date, I think it's called, but I don't know.
Yeah, so through the chair, Councillor Knodel, we would have those. It's not on the report. But I note that there are 3 loans that we have to outside organizations. And all 3 of them are maturing in 2023. But we do have those. It's just not, I just don't know them off.
Final question, I promise. What's the average length of a loan that we grant to, or is it unique to each circumstance?
Yeah, just looking at my colleague here, because some of the loans are related to public service. Each one is unique, depending on the circumstances.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would just like to, Councillor Robbins raised a question/comment about the notes, the discussion, the notes. So I had a question about what the other things causing the vacancies were, but I think just generally, some of the notes are a bit what I would find cryptic. I'm sure they make sense to people who have been involved in this for many moons. But just as an example, on page 68 of the package, unfavorable due to the impact of geopolitical and microeconomic developments and the effect of high inflation rates on interest or investment returns. I think I get what that means, but and I'm not saying we should correct it for this one, but I think maybe in the future, if we could flesh that out a little bit, make it a little bit more user-friendly, that would be very helpful to me at least. So, but I do appreciate that, like, that's probably easy to understand for many people around the table. So, Dr. Feltham?
I was just going to say, Mayor Clark, that we will work together in trying to simplify how it is we present our work. I am so incredibly proud of the people that I work with in the short period that I've come to know them. I think they do exceptional work. I think sometimes us accountants get so deep into this that we start to use vernacular that is impenetrable. So we will endeavor to provide some broader statements as well for context and understanding.
I appreciate that, and I think it happens to everyone in their respective fields. They kind of just get used to their own jargon. Seeing no further questions, we will vote. And that's unanimous. Moving on to item, I think I said the last item was 8.2, but it was 9.2, just for the record. Item 9.3, the Public Services Committee meeting of June 13, 2022. There is one item for adoption and 4 items for, 4 items for information.
I'll move these items.
I'll second.
Any questions or comments? Councillor Hirsch.
You got me before I pressed the button. Thanks for watching. Just a question with regards to obviously the COVID and recognizing the pandemic. I understand our advisory group is recommending this. So it's with a little bit of trepidation. I think for sure we need to have a historical remembrance of that event. However, it could come back, I guess, but knock on wood. I guess my question is this a takeaway for staff to develop kind of a protocol of what that looks like? Because I know we get into it gets problematic for me saying who contributed more, you know, and who did more and who carried the ball. So I'm at the mercy of that framework, because I think in some cases there's a lot of unsung heroes that I'm just worried that if we start doing that sort of acknowledgement that we miss people, and then that's a little bit my concern. So either a generic thank you and certainly some sort of, and we're not quite done yet maybe, but some sort of acknowledgement of the event, of course, because it's very significant for everyone. So just my thoughts.
Councillor Robbins.
Yeah, through the chair, if I could tell you, Councillor Hirsch, I was able to sit at the Community Vibrancy Board to hear the discussion that sort of bubbled up about this issue. And then, of course, Ms. Smith came and presented at Public Services. We had a discussion there as well. But some of the discussion at Community Vibrancy Board had been about timing and exactly what you're talking about. Who do you recognize? How do you recognize them? What is that going to mean? But we had confidence at Public Services that the staff would be able to come up with some great creative ideas that council could then review and say, is this the time? Is this what we think is appropriate? So but those discussions from the Vibrancy Board were also being like I said, it kind of bubbled up some of those issues that you've described. So I know that staff in our discussion at Public Services was certainly aware of those, and more than one staff member was at the Community Vibrancy Board when we discussed it as well. So I have a lot of confidence we're going to get options and we can consider them and what we think is most appropriate.
So to be clear, the recommendation here is that staff will put forward recommendations and that will come back through Public Services to committee or to council.
I'm seeing somebody nodding at me, but I don't know if it was my question to answer, but that was my understanding, but I'll let Managing Director Mastel tell us.
I believe that Managing Director Mastel nodded emphatically. So we will take that as an affirmative answer to the question. Seeing no more questions, we will vote. And that's unanimous. Moving on to item 9.4, Administrative Committee meeting dated June 15th, 2022. This one item is for adoption, but it's relating to a bylaw that we're going to be discussing in item 12.1.
I'll move that for adoption as indicated.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we will vote. And that's unanimous. Moving on to reports for reception, item 10.1, Police Commission meeting of May 26, 2022 for information.
So moved.
I'll second.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we will vote. And that's unanimous. 11.1 Administrative Committee meeting, May 26th. Is that right? Postponed at the June 6, 2022 City Council meeting. And we're and this item is still postponed. Item new bylaws under item 12.1, bylaw number 4710, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to allow council meetings and council committee meetings to be conducted by electronic means. So, City Clerk Robinson will give a little explanation about why this bylaw is necessary.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. So this is in front of you today because City Council previously was relying on a regulation that has expired as of March 27th, 2022. On top of that, Bill 21, the Red Tape Reduction Statutes Amendment Act, also came into place, which required council, if they wanted to have electronic meetings, to pass a bylaw to be in accordance with Section 199 of the MGA.
Thank you.
Okay, I would like to move for leave to introduce bylaw 4710, the electronic meetings bylaw, and then it'd be read for the first time.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Councillor Knodel?
Can I recommend, if it isn't already happening this evening, to do all the way to the third reading of this?
Yep, so prior to third reading, after second reading, if we get, if our vote passes in the second reading, then we can vote on unanimous consent to read it for a third time. All right, seeing no questions or comments, we will vote. And that's unanimous.
So I'd like to make an amendment to the bylaw. I move that Section 8 of electronic meeting bylaw be amended by striking out the word council.
So, we'll get a seconder if we can.
Second.
And Acting City Clerk Robinson is going to provide a little bit of background regarding this amendment.
The reason for striking out the word council is because meeting is defined in this bylaw, and we want to be clear that public attendance is not permitted for council meetings as well as committee meetings in closed session.
So the way that it's worded right now, because council meeting is specifically defined, it only includes council meetings. Meetings, on the other hand, without council in front of it, includes committee meetings and council meetings. So the motion is to strike council from before meetings so that it captures council and committee meetings. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, we will vote on the amendment. That's unanimous.
Sorry, my mistake. I'd like to move that bylaw 4710 as amended be read a second time.
Second.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, we will vote. And that's unanimous.
Okay, being it was unanimous, I move that bylaw 4710 as amended be read a third time and passed.
Can I have a motion first to read it for a third time by unanimous consent?
Yep, 10-4, sorry about that. I move that unanimous consent be given to a third reading of bylaw 4710 as amended at this time.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we will vote on the motion for unanimous consent. And that's unanimous. One more time.
I'm going to try again. So bylaw for the third reading, move that bylaw 4710 as amended be read a third time and passed.
Second.
All right, any questions or comments? Seeing none, we will vote. And that is unanimous. The bylaw is passed. All right, there are no notices of motion. Moving on to item 14.1, rain barrel program. And this item was put on the agenda by Councillor Sharps. There's also an item 14.2, right to dry movement, that is put on by Councillor Sharps. If you would like to deal with them separately, no, we can deal with them together. Okay.
Thank you. So I believe we all received an email from a citizen who had brought this to our attention, so by no means did I do this at all. But it was a very well-written email, and then when I started looking into it, I realized that, so let's talk about the first one, the rain barrel program. I didn't realize that we didn't have a water conservation policy, which I think is awesome. I also checked that there is a few cities in Alberta that do have a rain barrel program, so they encourage citizens to get out and conserve their water. So it was interesting because I was about to buy one, and then I got this email and I thought, oh yeah, city can help us with this. And I just think it's a really good idea to help conserve water and be more responsible adults. And sometimes the city taking the lead on responsible ownership is probably a good way to lead the citizens. So I wanted to bring that forward to see if that needed to go to public services or if it's something that we can talk about here.
Do you want to also describe the right to drive movement, which was part of the same email?
Yes, it was, but it is slightly different. So, no, I'm happy to do it all together. I don't want to make this long and drawn out. So I was actually kind of shocked when we got this email that they weren't allowed to line dry their clothes in this particular department or apartment that they're in. So talking to somebody that lived in Europe, I thought it was really weird when I got there and it was raining and we were putting stuff out to dry. I'm like, you guys are so weird. But reality was, in the hour and a half that it was dry and I got my clothes in, it was amazing and it was wonderful. And to this day, I line dry, albeit all over my backyard that nobody can see, but it is something that I really do enjoy doing. And if somebody doesn't enjoy doing, I think it's really, I was shocked to realize that we have things in place that actually stop people from doing this. So I'm wondering if we can review that as well. I mean, not only is it energy efficient, but I mean, it's only throwing clothes out on a line. So if there's any reason we have put stops to this in the past, or does anybody have any background knowledge on this? So I would like to see both of those go elevated, because to me, it's just low-hanging fruit and a very easy fix.
So Councillor Van Dyke, you have a comment or question, and then we'll put it to Managing Director Pancoast for further comment.
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on the right to dry, but on the rain barrel program, I did put through energy and infrastructure request to HatSmart program to look at including rain barrels or rainwater catchment systems in future HatSmart iterations. There is issues around the fact that we don't have water currently in that. It's just natural gas and electricity that subsidizes the program. But it is in the capable hands of the Managing Director Pancoast or Managing Director Mains. I'm not sure. I think it's, yeah, in HatSmart, right?
Okay, so we'll go to Managing Director Pancoast, and then if Acting Managing Director Mock wants to clean up, let him give it a whirl. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. To Councillor Sharps, on the clothesline or the right to dry program, the city does not regulate clothesline use. If there is a concern, it's likely at the condo level in particular. We could offer a clarification that there would not be a DP or any such permit required for clotheslines within our land use bylaw. We could certainly make that clarification in a future update, but we do not regulate and certainly would see value in pursuing that program. With respect to rain barrels, certainly HatSmart is an option, although today that program is tied more so to energy efficiency, and we would look to expand the scope, I presume, related to as we build out our environmental framework and set certain targets and look to drive alignment on some of the action plans there. I suspect that could be a very likely outcome of one of the action plans.
Acting Managing Director March.
Thank you, Your Worship. With respect to rain barrels, I would just like to note that City Assets is working closely with the Parks and Recreation Department right now to provide a limited pilot for rain barrels to gauge some of the interest. But it is something that, depending on interest, they would look to pursue in the upcoming business cycle.
When can we look forward to hearing more about the pilot?
Your Worship, the pilot is being run by the Parks and Recreation Department.
Managing Director Mastel.
Your Worship, I believe Managing Director Mock is referring to the pilot for the Sponsor a Tree program. So that's specific to trees that are on public lands that we'll be looking for residents to sponsor a tree, and we'll equip them with a variety of options to help hydrate the trees. So that'd be a rain barrel, garden hose, or I think it's water. Hang on here. Water bags, I think is the third one, and it specifically for certain public trees, not a widespread program across the community at this point in time.
I appreciate the example of the cross-divisional aspects of some of these issues. This is a really kind of highlights how, one issue can have 3 different divisions, maybe even 4 involved in it. So I appreciate all of your comments. Councillor Sharp, did you have any follow-up on that?
No, just to Managing Director Panko's comment, maybe some information would be good, because this individual was told me rather, when I followed up with her, that she was told she could not draw hair clothes outside as per city bylaw. So I didn't get a response back. So if we could just maybe post that and get some education around it. I do know that there was another one that said she was in an apartment building. You are absolutely correct. And I believe the apartment building does have the right to say no if they want, or do they? And I don't know. I mean, if it's outside on a deck, can they ban that? Or is it something that a city bylaw supersedes?
I would suggest that we, because I think it's very likely that apartments and condos absolutely can regulate what goes on. And so just for, as Managing Director Pancoast suggested, to, maybe even just an awareness campaign or posting of some kind would be helpful, but keeping in mind that private owners can set their own guidelines for their own buildings within reason. Councillor Robbins?
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. I just want to note that the city website does have information about laundry lines and drying your clothes outside as a conservation method. So it is contained in some of our information already.
No, I'm aware of that, but I'm asking for awareness on it so they don't have to go dig for it. So maybe just a little bit of education around rain barrels and what you can do. Sometimes, even though we know things, it's helpful if we do awareness on these things.
Councillor Dumanowski?
So, Your Worship, I appreciate the dialogue. I'm thinking procedurally. I'm wondering how some of these items are being brought to an open council without any referral to a committee or to staff in the form of questions. I appreciate the open, kind of candid conversation, but I think it puts staff and certainly council in an awkward position when we don't have the benefit of that. So typically, and I'm not saying I'm right, but these items could be brought forward if it's clarity questions, they'd be brought specific to staff outside of an open council meeting, or if it's something that we want to explore, then it would be brought here for referral to a committee to have a DI brought forward and then eventually back to council. So we have the information before us so we can have an intelligent conversation about it. So just my points.
I believe that one of these items has already been referred to energy and infrastructure, and I think that it would be appropriate to refer the other item to energy and infrastructure as well. Okay. Any comments, Interim City Manager Feltham?
No, I'm very comfortable with us going away and doing a little bit of work and returning, bringing forward to committees further information about where exactly we're sitting.
Seeing no further business, this meeting is, yep, we did that. This meeting is adjourned.